My name's Claire Malcolmson, and I'm the Executive Director of the Rescue Lake Simcoe Coalition. Here we are, welcome. First of all, I'm just going to introduce everybody who's joining me here tonight to speak to you. And I'm going to introduce the groups that are here as well. So while people are coming into the webinar, you'll see all of our panelists on the side. So this event is organized with the Water is Life Coalition for Water Justice, which was started by Becky Big Canoe, who is one of our speakers tonight, following 4 water walks. And the group collaborates with other groups on water protection efforts. Stop the Bradford Bypass is a collaboration of FROGS, which is Forbid Roads Over Green Spaces, which is Bill Foster's group. He's also one of our panelists tonight. A collaboration with FROGS, Simcoe County Greenbelt Coalition, which is where Margaret Crawford is from, and Rescue Lake Simcoe Coalition, which I run. And for a time anyway, the BWG Women's Plus group. The Rescue Lake Simcoe Coalition is a watershed-wide charity representing 29 groups that advocates at all levels of government to help keep Lake Simcoe clean. Simcoe County Greenbelt Coalition is a coalition of more than 40 groups in Simcoe County focused on healthy communities and the environment. They are calling for the expansion of the Greenbelt to Simcoe County so that current and future generations can benefit from clean water, local food, and green spaces. So the plan tonight is first of all to hear from Bill Foster a little bit of some maps overview of the area that we're talking about when we're talking about the lower landing. Then Cynthia Wesley Eskimo will do a land acknowledgement. She's one of our friends here from Georgina Island First Nation. Next, we're going to hear from some of our First Nations participants. Roderick, the elder is how he's referring to himself right now. And perhaps a couple of other people. Bert Duclos, I'll play his presentation. He's a historian and he's been studying the lower landing. He's put together a presentation that I will play. And then we will have Scarlett Janusas's presentation as well. She is a licensed archaeologist. And then Margaret will talk a little bit about our Stop the Bradford Bypass campaign and talk to everyone who's on the call here about how you can get involved. And at the end, I will have a question and answer. So please do stick around. Please use the Q&A boxes at the bottom of your Zoom screen for the chat. And so I'll facilitate a Q&A at the end. Becky Big Canoe is going to close the event tonight with some footage, some drone footage of Georgina Island First Nation and a prayer and some messages as well. So I did want to speak briefly about some of the main presenters here. So the main presenters start with Roddy Assance, great-grandson of Chief Assance. Oh, you know what? I'll show you this map while I'm doing this part actually, because it gives you an idea of the area that we're talking about here. This is the area that we're concerned about that I keep circling. Okay, but Roddy Assance, great-grandson of Chief Assance, who led his people to Christian Island after the forced relocation from Coldwater, the town northwest of Orillia that the Anishinaabe had settled in the mid-1800s. And Roddy is also a Georgina Island First Nation band member. Becky Big Canoe is also a Georgina Island First Nation member. She's the chair of the Water is Life Coalition for Water Justice, Wawa Sagaming Water Walk leader for 4 years, doing complete circles around Lake Simcoe 2014 to 2017. Bert Duclos is an avid local historian with 30 years in the private sector, and then over 18 years in the cultural heritage community as a consultant and volunteer, 12 of them as an Ontario public servant, where he was the primary municipal and public point of liaison for strategic advisory services on cultural heritage conservation best practices and the use of legislative tools, including the Ontario Heritage Act, Planning Act, Building Code, Funerals, Burials, and Cremation Services Act. First, Bert researches and writes about local history, conducts municipal outreach on provincial legislation, and offers valuable inspiration on engaged cultural heritage conservation. We're really, really lucky to have Bert with us here, sharing what he has learned about this area. Dr. Cynthia Wesley Eskimo served as Vice Provost for Indigenous Initiatives at Lakehead University for 3 years. In 2016, she was appointed the first Indigenous Chair for Truth and Reconciliation in Canada for Lakehead University and continues to develop pathways forward to reconciliation across Canada. She is a member of Georgian Island as well at Lake Simcoe and has dedicated her life to building bridges of understanding. She sees endless merit in bringing people from diverse cultures, ages, and backgrounds together to engage and practice practical dialogue and applied research initiatives. And I think this is a good example of that kind of work. At least I hope so. Finally, last but not least, Scarlett Janisas is a land and marine archaeologist, president of Scarlett Janisas Archaeology Incorporated, conducting archaeological assessments in Ontario. Scarlett holds a BA and MA in archaeology, serves as president of the Ontario Marine Heritage Committee. Scarlett was also a scuba diving instructor, teaching courses at the University of Western Ontario and independently. She has done really interesting excavations of 16th century Basque whaling ship, the San Juan, which sank in 1565 in Red Bay, Labrador, with Parks Canada. She's looked at prehistoric submerged shoreline study north of Tobermory and is marine archaeologist for search and recovery of the Avro-Arrow models in Lake Ontario. She has been working in underwater archaeology for over 40 years. As an OMHC project, she recently developed a marine archaeology course specifically to teach Indigenous monitors about marine archaeology, which is pretty fascinating. So a really interesting panel we have here tonight. So if folks are interested in what I just said about Scarlett, I mean, that's a good thing you can put in the chat for sure to say, tell me more about your marine archaeology course for Indigenous archaeology. Okay, so now I have done the introduction of people, and now we're going to go to Bill is just going to show us a little bit more about the area that we're talking about. And I'm just going to bring up Bill's slide here. You can, there you go, Bill. Thank you, Bill Foster.
Thank you, Claire, and good evening, everyone. Believe it or not, the proposed Bradford Bypass has been with us since 1993. That's when at a public information meeting, the Ontario Ministry of Transportation first announced that they were going to build a new highway to connect Highway 400 with the then proposed extension of Highway 404. It was initially only going to be a 2-lane highway, at least until traffic demand justified upgrading it to the then ultimately planned 4-lane controlled access freeway. 1993 is also when I, together with a number of my neighbors, founded Forbid Roads Over Green Spaces, otherwise known as FROGS. FROGS has closely monitored and actively participated in every step of MTO's protracted planning for this highway. Today, still, many people have never heard about the Bradford Bypass, or they think it's a dead issue. It's been dead for years. Well, it's not dead. Today, this highway is a very live issue, which the Ford government has used as a major plank in its election platform. It's even gone so far as to start construction of a bridge on County Road 3, should I say, which other people may know as Yonge Street or Highway 11 just north of Bradford. You're way ahead of me on the maps. Could we go back one, please? There, thank you. The map on your screen does a great job of showing you all the environmental impacts this highway will have. What it doesn't show is the impact on Bradford and Queensville. Bradford has grown significantly since this highway was first proposed and subsequently approved in 2001. This is no longer a Bradford bypass. This is now a northern ring road for Bradford. Likewise, As plans for Queensville's development materialize, it will also severely impact that community. Our focus today, however, is not on, our focus today, however, is on a very small, historically highly significant piece of riverfront property along the highway's route. It is known as the Lower Landing. Next slide, please. While archaeologists have done a fair bit of excavating in this area to determine its exact location, we know the Lower Landing is in the right location because of the 1900 survey dealing with the expropriation by King Edward VII of a part of the riverbank. So that is a formal official survey that's attached to a deed that's registered on title. And I circled in red where the Lower Landing is. So it's right on the edge of the river. And the shape of the river, as much as it may have changed over years, is still distinguishable enough that we know where this spot is. Next slide, please. When I mentioned that MTO has done digging, the initials BAGV42 are in fact those of designation for a historical archaeological site that MTO has identified. They identified this several years ago, and as a result of that site, they determined that they would relocate the highway. So where you see a couple of dotted green lines, that's the original highway route. And that went over part of the Silver Lakes Golf Course. Subsequently, because of this archaeological site, they moved the highway to the south to where the red lines are now. Everyone thought they were moving the highway to support the owner or the family that owns the Silver Lakes Golf Course, but from what we can see, it was actually because of this archaeological site. So now what you'll see is what I've added is a yellow area that I call the Lower Landing. That area is as depicted on the survey I showed you just before, and sure enough, archaeologists have been digging there and they've been finding stuff as well. So we'll be talking about that site tonight. What you'll see on the top right is a green box, which is land that was originally purchased by MTO for this highway. Now that they're moving the highway, it's redundant property. And one of the things we are recommending is that that green area be turned into an interpretation center for the Lower Landing, and they move their highway somewhere else. So that's it for me, and I encourage you to take in the amount of history and information from a number of cultures concerning this very historic, very valuable site. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill. That was very good context. And really, thanks, folks, for all the comments in the chat. It's great to hear where you're from. And so next we have, now that we understand sort of the land and the landscape that we're talking about, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Cynthia Wesley Eskimo.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Claire and Bill, for that. Bill, that was really interesting. Thank you for sharing that. I'm really delighted to see it be so clear for people what we're looking at. So yes, Claire's told you I'm a member and resident of the was a Georgian Island First Nation, and I'm actually coming to you from the island this evening along with the snow, so hopefully we'll see summer back again. I'm also the chair for Truth and Reconciliation at Lakehead, and I'm the chair of the governing circle for the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation at the University of Manitoba in Winnipeg. And I'm a mother and grandmother, and I'm very honored to be with you this evening and being asked to provide a land acknowledgement on this. I'm also inclined to add that while land acknowledgements provide a nod to Indigenous rights in the treaty relationship, they more importantly need to highlight the need for concrete action on the many land and water issues Indigenous peoples have been expressing concern over for about the last several hundred years. I think together with the balance of the population around Lake Simcoe, we all have a lot of work to do because of because Lake Simcoe, or Shenyang, Shining Waters, as it's actually should be called, still suffers from a lot of human irresponsibility and carelessness. So tonight and every day, we're required to be mindful of our responsibility to do more, to do better, and to work together so we're working well. I've had the pleasure of working on Lake Simcoe committees over the course of time, and there's a very dedicated people, and tonight is no different. So thank you all for joining joining us. In terms of a land acknowledgement, I want to say that the people of Ontario have increasingly acknowledged that all lands situated on the traditional lands and waters of the Anishinaabe people, which include the Chippewa, the Odawa, the Ojibwe, and Potawatomi nations, collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy, have been stewarded, occupied, and protected by the Indigenous peoples of this territory since time immemorial. I want to acknowledge the presence of a growing Métis population and a sprinkle of Inuit who are also very passionate about the protection and use of this land and the health of the waters of the Lower Landing and beautiful Ashunyang. We acknowledge that the members of the Rescue Lake Simcoe Coalition and the many other groups who have dedicated themselves to honoring Indigenous history, culture, languages, and the sacred sites of this territory. They're committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. We acknowledge the people in this region who are also dedicating themselves to this critical concern and working with us to stop the kinds of development that will clearly harm our environment. So miigwech for everybody that has joined us this evening, and I'm very much looking forward to the presentation from the rest of the people on the panel. So thank you.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Cynthia. Very thoughtful and tying it together as always. So that's brilliant. So our next speaker, our first speaker is Radia Sands, who's asked to be identified as Roderick the Elder today. So I'm going to go in and welcome Roddy. Tell us what you think we would like us to hear about the Lower Landing and the context here.
Hi, my name is Roderick Assens. I'm from Christian Island, Mosley Band. I'm here talking because my grandchildren are here at Georgina Island, closer to the landing, Holland Landing. I first heard about this, like you said, years ago, when they first mentioned that they were going to make a highway right through where we were on that settlement. And I know there's a lot of history there that I just read on. A lot of history that I don't think the Ford government or their ministers are very aware of, or they wouldn't be doing this. They should at least trying to find another solution to the transportation system in Ontario. I know people have to live everywhere, but there's roads going there already to where they want to go. They don't need that. It might take them another half an hour to get to work or where they live. That's not too much to ask for to help keeping that place as it is. We need that place to look back on, and the community around there is going to be very bothered by that big highway going through. This is a small community, and that's the way it should stay. And there's people like I heard reading just a while ago that been through there for all these, what, the last couple hundred years or more than that. Like you said, our ancestors going through there, and there's people that are buried there, white and native, that should be left alone there. That's my first concern. And what are they going to do? They don't know where the burial plots are. At least I haven't heard of them finding any, but they're there. The spirits, our spirits, shouldn't be bothered, or anybody's. I have a connection to that myself, that place, Holland Landing, as my ancestor Thomas Assens was kidnapped there. He was a son of Chief John Assens. He was kidnapped there by the, they called them the Redcoats. And he was taken to England with 2 other children when they were around 9 years old. And they kept them there for another 10 years or so. And he lived near, they entertained the kings of England and the queens and people like that, royalty in England. And they got paid a pretty penny for doing that over there in England. But 2 of the boys didn't come back. And within all those 10 years, his mother and family waited there for him. They didn't know where he went. But they waited all those 10 years, and he came back as a man, 20 years or old or so, and they recognized him right away. But on his way back from England, they, on that ship he was coming back on with the Royal Navy, they stole all his money and everything they gave him to come back to Canada with. They stole it all. He come back with nothing. All them years had nothing to show for it. And people that have, like at Holland Landing, their people have nothing to show for it either. This is an empty land now. There's only rotting logs, you know. It's a quiet place. I was there, and I believe it should be left alone there. This lake is already polluted from farming, phosphates going into the lake, and motor boats, sewage. And it's a big problem already, you know. Fix those problems first. Fix the lake first before anything else. Then let that highway be, and nobody's going to cry over it for the next 10 years if there ain't no highway. It's not going to kill anybody if it doesn't get built. Nobody's going to die. Maybe Mr. Ford waiting for it, but that's his problem. And like, we have this help now. Let's stick together and try and accomplish what other people want to accomplish on our native side and your side. And this is going to be a big problem later. You know, nip it in the bud before it starts. There's a long list of bad things that can come out of this that nobody even has thought of yet. They'll get halfway through this road and then find out, well, that the land they're building on is swampland, and they're going to have to bring in tons of rock and soil and everything. That's a marshy land all the way from near Highway 400. It's not buildable land. It can easily sink. It's not meant to be. That's why that river's there in the first place. It's meant to be for drinking, fishing, eating, transportation, and whatever people are along there, they shouldn't be using motorboats anyway over there, because it's a river that needs help. Lots of help. It's a dying river. We need to, I'd like my great-grandchildren to go see that place if it ever, the landing, because like I said, I have a historical connection to that place. And my grandfather, I'm 5th generation from Chief John Assens. And I'm sure he visited there, and my uncles and aunties, my grandmas, and people from up north, like Cynthia said, all our other people, Potawatomis, Ottawas, and they've been there too. They're probably laying around there too still. Nobody lives forever down that way. It's rough back then. And the white people that were there, they're laying there too still. And if you find the bodies when you are digging, what are you going to do with them? You don't know who they were. You know, you can't put them in one big grave and say, everything's okay. Doesn't work that way. So people have to look at the big picture, like not much of this world is left in the state it's in. And this Lake Simcoe is in a good state, fairly well good state, and the rivers. But all this building and everything is causing land to die. You can see trees dead along the highways, dead trees from salt. That's one step there that's causing all of this. And all that salt goes into the water. It leaches into the water, into Lake Simcoe. And that's going to be a big problem. There's already roads all around Lake Simcoe that have roads salt leaching into the water. And I've seen myself fish that are not around anymore. I've seen three-legged frogs and snakes that are two-headed snakes. So you know that there's a lot of chemicals in that water already. And people on Georgina Island take their water from Lake Simcoe. And what do? What we have to do, we have to add a couple of hundred more chemicals to the water to make it safe. So we're getting hit twice from the main water, and then we have to drink all those chemicals to stop the bad water. But then it's bad water anyway, because we're drinking it. They say it's good, but I don't see them bottling it and drinking it, taking it out of Lake Simcoe like they do fresh water in the stores. You don't see Lake Simcoe water on it, on the water bottles, of course not. And that's going to be one of my concerns, that my children, everybody else's grandchildren, can't even swim in the lake. They get boils already, and they get sick, and their eyes water, and it's bad. My grandchildren had that, and other children around here, from the dirtiness of the lake. It's bad already. And this highway is not going to be any help to that at all, not a bit. And I hope that there's another way of doing all this. They got roads, you can go around the place. Like I said, it'll take you another half an hour, but you're saving a lot of animals, fish, people that live around that area. And it is a nice area. It's from what I've seen along the shores of that, it's still pristine land, except where there are cottages, but other places it is. And it's beautiful, still is a beautiful place to be living around. I enjoy it here. My kids do. And I just hope that people from Georgina can benefit from this Rescue Lake Simcoe Coalition, because they need it. And people up in the water goes through Rama, then they drink the same water as Lake Simcoe. And it's the water is there. That river doesn't go all the way to the city. So there's no drainage that I don't think. But the people there need to look at the big picture of, gotta look 50 years ahead at least a generation. At least a generation to think about this. If they need it, really need it, they'll find some other way. You know, use the old train tracks that are around there. Put people back on trains. Go to work. Like there's one going from Toronto all the way through Brecon and that, and there's a lot of buildup in Brecon, I see, and Beaverton. There's train tracks that go right through there. They could go to work in Toronto, come back home by train. They don't need a highway. You don't need it. You have transportation already on the north side, the south side, the east side, the west side. So it's transportation's there. You just fix that up first before you go building a highway, spending all kinds of money that isn't theirs to use anyway. It's the people's money. And we have a right to say, no, that's our money and we don't want to spend it on that. We have other better things to do, housing. People living all over the Simcoe County need housing and things like that. There's better ways of spending money than like I was watching that this big highway will lead through these big estates. If they want to live in big estates, let them live north of here near Toronto. Let them live there. There's everything there for them. Why do they have to try and make everything for themselves up here again? You don't need it. They already have everything. They have a big city. They got Barrie. They got Toronto. They got the cities on the west side and really on the north side. They live over there. Make a road over there. They'll fix the roads all around Lake Simcoe that have proper drainage and everything. That they should have a collection system of where the drainage is to fix the water before it goes back into the lake. Like plants that purify the water before it goes back into any drainage system. They could make them very easy. They invent everything else. They invent something for that. If you know what to do, do it. And I don't think that's very smart thing to do. It's the way they're going about it. And like I said, the government is not paying attention to like people that live here, the grassroots people, the pioneers. There's a lot of old families around here that don't want that. And new families that are moved in within the last 100 years or so, but they're settled in here, and who wants to move? They're going to have to move people away from that where they live now, and it's just going to make a big mess. And all we barely have any wildlife left already, anyhow, and they're going to kill the rest of them. Like I said, the frogs and animals that eat the frog, like the whole food chain is going to be bothered by this. So it's not good for anybody that lives around this lake or anybody that's going to live around this lake for the next 100 years or so. We need to, this is a very sensitive lake, and it needs to be taken care of and not abused in any way or form. And I hope that people who want to do this come to their senses and really think what's going to happen. I don't think they have thought it through very good, or this wouldn't be happening. And I hope people see it my way. Thank you. Okay,
Thank you. Thank you so much, Roderick.
thank you.
Amazing. So that was great. I really love this. Thank you, Roderick. Like, just hearing from your perspective how things are connected, I think, is a really important thing that the rest of us need to hear again and again and again.
Yeah.
As a settler, I am deeply disturbed by the kidnapping and the stealing of money stories. I know a lot of other people are. Thank you for sharing that. It's painful and awful. And this is what reconciliation is, right? Let's see it and face it. So I appreciate that.
I'm going to hire a good player.
Next, I'm going to ask you to mute, actually, Roderick the Elder. And then I'm going to play a presentation that was put together by Bert Duclos.
The Lower Landing, a place that shaped the province. The Lower Landing's location is within the land and water shown in the red outline. The Lower Landing is the generally accepted name of a culture heritage landscape located on the east bank of the East Holland River in the town of East Gwillimbury, Ontario. A culture heritage landscape is a defined geographical area that may have been modified by human activity and identified as having culture heritage value or interest by a community, including an Indigenous community. This is a summary of the Lower Landing's special historic, social, and cultural associations and contextual traditional uses. In this area, now known as Southern Ontario, before the introduction of the horse, people got around by foot or by water. For millennia, Indigenous peoples and later colonists used a variety of routes to move within, into, and beyond the area between the waters of the lower Great Lakes. Routes chosen were guided by departure and destination points, reason for travel, method of travel, season, and safety from enemies. A northern water and land route followed the Ottawa, Mattawa, and French rivers to northern Georgian Bay. A southern water route along the St. Lawrence River, Lake Ontario, the Niagara River, Lake Erie, and the Detroit River and onward was long, difficult, and often through enemy territory. The much safer and quicker way to reach Lake Huron was via Lake Simcoe. To get there from the south were the Toronto Carrying Places routes from Lake Ontario. One started at the mouth of the Humber River and took foot travelers north to a terminus on the Holland River West Branch, where canoeists went east to the Holland River East Branch and onward to Lake Simcoe. Other land routes from Lake Ontario followed the Don River or the Rouge River, running northwest to the Holland River East Branch and onward by water to Lake Simcoe. Once there, two alternate routes could be taken. One by canoe through the Narrows into Lake Couchiching and the Severn River and its many rapids to its outlet at Georgian Bay. The other was by canoe to the west end of Kempenfelt Bay, then overland 9 miles to the Nottawasaga River, and then by water to its mouth at Nottawasaga Bay at today's Wasaga Beach. These Toronto Carrying Places routes to the meeting of the Holler River branches acted as a junction to get to and from other places. As the East Holland River could be a difficult paddle upstream in drier seasons, the Lower Landing became the only practical trailhead. For many, the way north was the destination. For countless generations, the area north of here was home to the Wendat and other Algonquian and Iroquoian-speaking peoples. To these people, the Lower Landing area was the natural focus of their travels between Point South and home. The Lower Landing was a busy, strategic focal point for families, trade, hunting, habitat relocation, exploration, and conflict. To the Anishinaabe people, the Holland River was known to the Chippewa as Escoyonde, and as Mishiaguin to the Mississauga. Lower Landing is one of a variety of place names imposed on it by Euro-Canadians. Other post-contact names included Pine Fort, Landing Place, Fort Gwillimbury, Old Indian Landing, Steamboat Landing, and Old Soldiers Landing. We name places that have meaning to us. Records, historical maps, and the research of many confirm the Lower Landing site. The first definitive record of the Lower Landing's use is of that by Lieutenant Governor John Graves Simcoe and his party on October 11, 1793. They stopped here on their return from Georgian Bay to the new capital of Upper Canada at York while seeking a northern military route. The site of the Lower Landing was marked on the map. By water, it is approximately 4.7 kilometers from the mouth of Holland River to the forks of the West Holland River and the East Holland River, and an additional 4.5 kilometers from there to the Lower Landing. Alexander MacDonald, Home District Sheriff, who accompanied Lieutenant Governor Simcoe, wrote in his journal, "The 11th, about 9 o'clock, left our encampment, embarked and soon got out of the lake, paddled up the river about 3 miles, then got into another river, and about 2 o'clock got to the landing place of the Red Pine Fort." The Red Pine Fort, likely made by British surveyors or perhaps French traders, was probably no more than a lean-to or a crude hut of logs. Contemporary early 19th century Toronto area historians recorded the use of the Lower Landing, noting its location at Lot 118 of East Gwillimbury. Later records include Tremaine's map of the County of York, published in 1860. Here it notes the Lower Landing as the Old Indian Landing. Note the faint inclusion of the number 118 in the red circle. More recent official records exactly make note of the Lower Landing location. Here an extract of Instrument 11057, the December 16, 1908 sale of parts of Lot 118, Concession 1, west of Yonge Street, East Gwillimbury, from Duncan Bell to His Majesty King Edward VII, including a plan noting the location of the Lower Landing. These many records comfortably confirm the location of the Lower Landing on the east bank of the East Holland River on Lot 118, Concession 1, Town of East Gwillimbury. Indigenous peoples' knowledge of the value of the Lower Landing and the many routes between Lake Ontario and the interior was shared with European explorers, traders, and colonists. This 1678 New France map of the area is the earliest known map showing one of the routes. The first Europeans recorded to travel the Lower Landing area were Jesuit missionaries Father Jean de Brebeuf and Father Joseph Chamonix, passing through on their return to the Wendat in the spring of 1641. It's believed they traveled the Toronto carrying place along the Humber River, West Holland River, Lake Simcoe route. Though there was no record they diverted the 4.5 kilometers south from the Holland River branch's junction to the Lower Landing site, it can be assumed the Wendat made them aware of it. Records also relate the use of the Humber River, West Holland River, Lake Simcoe route by notable French explorer René Robert Cavelier, Sieur de la Salle, on his August 1681 voyage to the Mississippi. For over 150 years, the fur trade, including Courrier de Bois, Voyageur, and the Northwest Company, used this route to the Upper Great Lakes and beyond. As earlier related, the first definitive record of the Lower Landing's use is of that by Lieutenant Governor John Graves Simcoe and his party on October 11, 1793. Recognizing the military and supply value of this northern launch point, Simcoe lost no time in ordering the laying out of a cart road, Yonge Street, to here from York. Following a survey by Augustus Jones, Deputy Surveyor General, work cutting out a trail by the Queen's Rangers began on January 4, 1796, and reached the area of the Lower Landing on February 16th. The importance of this to the fledgling colony cannot be understated. In a February 27, 1796 letter to the British Secretary of State for the Home Department, Simcoe wrote, "The road from York to the headwaters of Lake Huron has been opened, and by this means a very excellent tract of country is rendered available for future settlers." From then on, the Lower Landing became of strategic importance to the British colony, its military, its traders, and its settlers. Soon after, a depot of hewn log trade and storage buildings was erected by the Northwest Company to support its vast fur trade empire. Here, Indigenous travelers regularly arrived from all over the Upper Great Lakes by fur-laden canoes to do business. Records speak of no less than 30 wigwams at times clustered about the banks of the Holland River. In 1812, David Thompson, the great cartographer and explorer of Canada's West and participant in the Boundary Commission, stopped at the Lower Landing on his way home to Montreal. The pivotal role of the Lower Landing in the survival of the young Canadian colony during the War of 1812 is immeasurable. The September 1813 defeat of the British Navy by the Americans in the Battle of Lake Erie was of strategic importance. This heightened the risk of American invasion of Canada, as well as their recapture of Fort Michilimackinac, a military and trade outpost strategically located at the straits between Lakes Huron and Michigan, and the resulting British loss of control of the Northwest and Upper Great Lakes. Lieutenant Colonel Robert McDougall of the Glengarry Light Infantry Fencibles was ordered to strengthen Michilimackinac defenses. This being the only practical and safe departure point remaining for a route to Lake Huron, in February 1814, with 10 officers, 220 infantry and artillerymen, and 20 seamen, McDougall traveled to York and made his way to the Lower Landing, now an important military and naval depot. Following the trek to the Willow Creek Depot at the end of the portage to the Nottawasaga River, south of present-day Edenvale, the company built a fleet of 29 bateaux to carry supplies and the reinforcements for Michilimackinac. Arriving at Michilimackinac on May the 18th, McDougall set about strengthening its defenses. On August the 4th, American Captain Arthur Sinclair, with 600 to 700 troops and a fleet of 4 brigs, anchored off of Michilimackinac and attempted a landing. With McDougall's preparation, the fort's defenders successfully defeated the attack on Michilimackinac, resulting in Sinclair sending most of his ships back to Lake Erie. The Royal Ontario Museum's 1815 painting by Robert Irvine of the Royal Naval Depot Holland Landing shows the many buildings and wharves that stood at the Lower Landing at the time of Lieutenant Colonel McDougall's use. Following the War of 1812's end, many unneeded naval and military supplies were left at the Lower Landing Depot. Eventually, an anchor made for a naval vessel and abandoned at the Lower Landing was moved by oxen to a park site in the community of Holland Landing, where it is on display today. On the second of his 3 Arctic expeditions, in April 1825, renowned explorer Sir John Franklin, leading the Mackenzie River expedition, is recorded as arranging passage across Lake Simcoe from the Lower Landing. During the first decades of the 19th century, the annual distribution of gifts to First Nations from across Upper Canada took place at the Lower Landing. At times, these events were the occasion of large missionary meetings. One such was attended by the Reverend Peter Jones, Ojibwe chief and Methodist minister, who described the events in his journal of August 13th and 15th, 1828. From the middle of the 19th century until the building of the railway, the Lower Landing's docks were a bustling departure point for many steamers carrying mail, cargo, and passengers across Lake Simcoe. One such vessel was the steamer Peter Robinson. It was a 125-foot steamship with a top speed of 10 miles per hour and a flat bottom less likely to get stuck in the mud of the Holland River. In the 1838 edition of the Toronto Patriot, it advertised leaving Holland Landing for Atherley every Tuesday and Thursday, and will leave the Narrows for their Holland Landing every Wednesday and Friday. Recent remaining evidence of the Lower Landing's dock is shown in this photo published in the 1966 book East Gwillimbury in the 19th Century by Gladys M. Rowling, Deputy Reeve, East Gwillimbury Township. Today, the Lower Landing doesn't look like much. Certainly not much different than any other stretch of this or many other rivers. Flat, sparsely wooded, lots of reeds and bulrushes, swallows darting about, bucolic, yet appearing unexceptional. Looks are deceiving. On the contrary, we know this place that shaped the province is more than exceptional.
All right, I'm back. Thank you, Bert. Bert very, very cleverly recorded his presentation in advance, so he was able to get all of that in. So it's a huge amount of research, and I'm just extremely grateful, as I'm sure everybody is here. So please put your questions into the chat. Next, I'm going to play Scarlett Janisas's presentation. And And after that, we will go to a Q&A.
This presentation will provide an overview of the archaeology that has been conducted at the site of the lower landing. Archaeology is a discipline that is usually paired with environmental and historic research. This multidisciplinary approach provides the data necessary for the interpretation of the tangible aspects of archaeology. Bert Duclos has provided the history of the site and its importance in the previous presentation. Archaeology is governed by the Ministry of Citizenship and Multiculturalism, and a license is required to conduct any archaeological work. There are 4 broad stages used in conducting archaeology. Stage 1 is the background research. Stage 2 is the preliminary fieldwork involving survey. Stage 3 is test excavation to determine site limits, chronology, and significance, and Stage 4 is partial or full excavation, coupled or replaced by avoidance and protection of a site. It needs to be said that archaeology is in itself a destructive force. The difference between archaeological impact on an area and that of development is, however, a world apart. While development destroys a site forever, archaeology can destroy, but a process of this is a detailed recording prior to its destruction, essentially recreating the site on paper. In some cases, early stages of archaeology recognize the significance of a site, and a recommendation will be made for avoidance and protection rather than its excavation. The rationale behind this is twofold. First, archaeology, like any other discipline, is evolving in terms of its approaches to extracting and interpreting data. And secondly, sometimes a site evaluated as having significance to a particular group or culture warrants its avoidance and protection. Such is certainly the case of the site of the lower landing. The area of the lower landing was first subject to Stage 2 assessment in 1996 with minimal background research. The Stage 2 encompassed an area of 600 by 100 meters on part of Lot 118. However, approximately 2 hectares of the study area were not surveyed, the archaeologists citing wet conditions. The blue areas shown on this slide illustrate the areas that were not subject to Stage 2 testing. Wet site archaeology has largely been overlooked by the ministry up until a few years ago. In the case of the lower landing, it has been reported that the East Holland River had a meander between 161 and 310 meters. This essentially means that activities in and around the river were constantly shifting around where the water flowed, and that some of the site areas might be located in a currently wet area, and as we know from research and past activities, in the river itself. BA-GV-42 was discovered through test pitting. Test pitting is a hand and shovel method where an approximately 30 centimeter wide hole is excavated to subsoil and content screened for possible cultural material. The Stage 2 survey recovered 65 prehistoric ceramic sherds, which dated to the Middle Woodland period, an end scraper, a core, and 2 retouched flakes, 4 historic period artifacts, which were a hand-wrought spike, part of a smoking pipe, and 2 ceramic sherds, 12 bone fragments, and 46 amorphous lumps of fired clay daub. The latter have been attributed to a possible chimney. The consultant, based on these artifacts, suggested that the site was multi-component, that is, used by different groups and in different times, dating from sometime around 400 BC and well into the 19th century. The recommendation was that if the site could not be protected, then it should be the subject of a comprehensive salvage excavation. Such mitigation activities should commence with a detailed Stage 3 assessment in order to precisely determine the locations, character, and extent of archaeological deposits within the right-of-way. 8 years later, a Stage 3 archaeological assessment of the site was conducted to determine site size, cultural affiliation, and determine site significance. Work was done by a different consultant, and they expanded on the background research from 1996, but also in a limited way. The consultant noted that the East Holland River was a significant transportation route for Euro-Canadians early in the 18th century. It was also noted that the area was thought to be that of the lower landing. The Stage 3 assessment extended 220 meters along the riverbank. The excavations were conducted by placing 1 square meter test units across the site at 10-meter intervals. The slide illustrates the location of the test units and those with cultural features located within them. There were 98 1-meter square test units excavated in total, with 85 positive test units. This indicates an almost 90% return on the test excavations in terms of positive units with either artifacts and/or cultural features. Approximately 3,800 artifacts were recovered, and 7 possible cultural features and 1 postmold were located in 8 test units. Indigenous artifacts recovered from the positive units included 7 cores, 384 pieces of debitage, that is the byproduct of producing tools, 23 utilized flakes, 2 scrapers, 9 bifaces, 3 drills, 13 projectile points, 8 ground stone fragments, and over 3,000 ceramic sherds. Those artifacts that were diagnostic, that is, providing indications of cultural and temporal identification, were from the Middle Woodland and Princess Point periods. Historic artifacts recovered totaled over 300 artifacts and included a trade axe, cut nails, wire nails, window glass, brick fragments, mud and daub fragments, mouth harps, a pewter utensil, buckshot, 4 gunflints, a button, ceramics, coal, and smoking pipe fragments. In addition, close to 1,000 pieces of faunal material were recovered, some attributable to domesticated animals, but others could possibly be associated with indigenous hunting and fishing and/or processing. The site was confirmed again by this consultant as multi-component, with representative artifacts from the Middle and Late Archaic periods, the Middle Woodland to Early Late Woodland period, and 19th to 20th centuries artifacts. The consultant was clear. The East Holland River site is a highly significant archaeological resource with both prehistoric and historic components. Recommendations were for Stage 4 excavation. Within this stage, the option of avoidance and protection is raised in addition to the possible excavation in areas that will be impacted by construction. It was also recommended that detailed historic research be conducted to confirm if this was in fact the site of the lower landing. As no architectural features were located during the Stage 3, another recommendation was for trenching across the site in the hopes that it might produce evidence of buildings, etc. Willard Peterson, David Liddell, and Glenn Penoyer, the latter an avocational archaeologist, first met in 2001 in a shared interest in the archaeology of the East Holland River. Liddell had actually found the site accidentally while sitting on the river bottom cooling off in the summer, when he brought up a chamber pot from the mud, as well as some other artifacts. Peterson was passionate about history, and as a property owner in the area with neighbor Liddell, in 2010 the two set out to conduct historic research in the area, especially after Liddell found artifacts in the river. They were certainly prompted by the proposed highway corridor development, but this does not diminish their research. Willard produced 2 videos of the research. The finding and recovery of artifacts was, however, done without an archaeological license. Penoyer recommended further investigation be conducted on the lot and south of the lot. He conducted some metal detector work, and although not mentioned in his report, there was recovery of artifacts from the East Holland River. Penoyer conjectured that the artifacts had washed into the river through erosion of the shoreline. Peterson's, Liddell, and Penoyer's continued research convinced them that this was the site of the lower landing. In 2014, Penoyer, presumably with the aid of Peterson and Liddell, removed over 700 artifacts from the East Holland River. In this slide, you can see a small cannonball, which would have been shot from an 8-pounder, and the smaller would have been fired from the 4-pounder cannon or carronade. The cannonballs were apparently found on land. As you can see from the river extraction of artifacts, there was no recording of where these artifacts came from in any scientific manner. Peterson kept these artifacts, although Pennoyer had arranged for the Sharon Temple to accept them, and Peterson refused to give the artifacts to Pennoyer. On the left side of the slide is a partially reconstructed Indigenous pot recovered by Peterson in 2016. Peterson passed away and his son Anders inherited the collection. Pennoyer sought out the collection again, but was once again refused. This slide shows a bone and antler harpoon. Anders Peterson, in written correspondence, says, "The naval depot is in fact in the river, and I physically located it after my father's passing." The efforts of laymen in the pursuit of historic knowledge is invaluable, and avocational archaeologists often contribute to the field. However, when not conducted under license, there are no requirements for detailing activities, reporting, or finding a repository for the recovered artifacts. As part of the Stage 1 assessment of a much larger area than just the lower landing, the consultant conducted a desktop study and suggested that most of these areas were considered to exhibit archaeological potential. Remember that the Stage 3 was conducted in 2004, so quite a bit of time has passed between any other investigation. For BAGV-42, they recommended that if the site cannot be avoided by development, then a Stage 3 archaeological assessment is recommended. For the river, no impacts to the riverbed of either branch of the Holland River are anticipated. However, if any changes are made and impacts may occur to the bed or either branch of the Holland River, a marine archaeological assessment should be completed, which may result in the recommendation that a marine archaeological assessment be undertaken. This report, by the way, was revised to incorporate the OMHC report of 2021 and resubmitted to the ministry in 2022. Pennoyer contacted myself in 2021 to inquire about the best ways to conduct marine archaeology. I advised that a marine archaeological license was the first requirement and that the OMHC, a volunteer organization, could possibly conduct some investigations of the river. The OMHC applied and received a license and started the process by conducting a very concise and detailed background research of the lower landing. As part of the research, key people were contacted for information. Anders Peterson, son of Willard, provided location information and details about some in-water finds. He was able to feel, as a mud river with almost nil visibility, the outline of a building and a chimney, as well as the remains of an old pier. A license was received in 2021 by the OMHC, and activities included detailed background research, including review of past archaeological reports, and activities centered in the area, environmental reports, historic documentation and maps, consultation with other experts. Field assessment included a canoe survey. 2 canoes, each manned by 2 individuals, were used to examine any open areas of the riverbank along the east side of the East Holland River, looking for eroding materials. The west side of the river was approached, but the vegetation was so thick that we were not able to see any of the banks. The geotechnical survey was conducted with side-scan sonar and magnetometer in 2 directions in the center of the river channel. The areas closest to either the east or the west bank could not be entered with a 26-foot boat, as the water depth dropped off dramatically, and the deepest point in the study area was only 1.4 meters. The survey, therefore, was restricted to the main channel. Any anomalies were marked and a screenshot taken of the target. The magnetometer survey was conducted to ascertain if there was any truth to the story by Willard Peterson that 8 or 9 cannon had been taken out onto the ice following the end of the War of 1812 and left to drop into the river once the ice had thawed. There were a total of 8 recorded hits. These targets were all buried and not ground truthed, which would require excavation and a special license. However, there is a reasonable expectation that these hits represent buried large metal objects. Summary of the findings from OMHC. PAGV-42 is located immediately adjacent to a portion of the East Holland River, which has been the subject of a Stage 2 and Stage 3 archaeological assessment. Panoia recovered artifacts that have eroded into the river from the land archaeological site, indicating that there is more cultural material that remains in this location. In this location, the river has a high meander belt width of between 161 and 310 meters. Historic accounts indicate that this location is that of the lower landing, which includes the site of the Red Pine Fort, the site of trading with local Indigenous communities, a terminus for a stagecoach run, possible shipbuilding area, a point of launch for historic excursion boats, and an area where cannons may have been deposited directly into the river. In addition, archaeological evidence shows the use of the area by Indigenous people for millennia. The riverbed will be either directly or indirectly impacted by the proposed development. No archaeological investigations have been conducted on the west side of the river in this locale, on land or directly in the water. The East Holland River is a mud river and does not lend itself to any visual observations at the bottom. Any cultural material that has eroded or been either deliberately or accidentally deposited into the river is buried in the bottom sediments. The cultural material, based on side-scan sonar observations of drag marks and hull drag, is threatened by boaters and associated activities, by natural erosion accelerated by boat wake, etc. A sub-bottom profiler should be able to delineate any possible cannon and other large objects buried in the sediment. A building outline was identified by Anders Peterson in the water. There is also a strong likelihood of both Indigenous and Euro-Canadian artifacts being present. Any overhead or nearby transportation roadways will contribute a high salt content to the river, affecting not only biological organisms but also speed the deterioration of archaeological materials in and adjacent to the river. Out of this came recommendations. First and foremost, the protection and avoidance of any development or disturbance of the Holland River and its environs. If avoidance and protection of the in-water resource is not possible, then the entire river in this locale should be subject to continued marine archaeological assessment. The west side of the East Holland River has not yet been subject to any investigation, and archaeological assessment is recommended both on land and in water. It is recommended that due to the threatened nature of the resource, a cofferdam be erected and the in-water site excavated. It is recommended that if a cofferdam is not possible, that the area be gridded and as excavation proceeds, that vertical separations be put in place to isolate units. It is unlikely that stratigraphic layering exists, but more that the site has eroded into the river. However, measures can still be taken to excavate in arbitrary levels. It's recommended that additional mag and sub-bottom profiler be conducted from a small draft boat to cover off shallow parts of the river. A conservation plan must be in place prior to any excavation and/or artifact recovery. Indigenous engagement must be conducted as the site is Indigenous in nature. Analysis of all materials must be part of the plan for the recovery of cultural material. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Scarlett, for doing that pre-recorded presentation as well. There's so much detail, so many pieces of research here. We're going to change gears a little bit. There's a little tiny bit of a change of plan. Becky wanted to show everybody here something that she is offering as an enticement Margaret's going to talk about this a little bit, but we are trying to fundraise for this work. We have no more money for it. So Becky has something to show us related to that. So Becky, take it away. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, I have something happens with my little clicker and anyway, I'm here.
Okay. I think come a bit closer because you're very fuzzy. Everything is fuzzy.
Oh, okay. Yeah. How's that?
Maybe
Still
there's
very
something
fuzzy.
on your
Is there
camera
something
lens.
on your camera?
Yeah, it's very blurry.
Oh, no, why? Oh, darn. Is it still that way?
Yeah.
No, wait.
Okay.
Okay, I have these little lens cleaners too. Let me mention that unfortunately Leland can't join us because he was out fishing and he stuck a finger in his eye. Started swelling up, so he's gone to a clinic to see what's going on.
Oh, somebody says it's a filter. So I'm wondering, Becky, if you want to.
Okay, let me check my settings because I did try for the first time that background thing.
Okay.
How would I fix that, Margaret?
Just come a bit closer. Just let's try this. Just come a bit
No,
closer.
it's-
No, it's not
That's not
that.
going to help. Go
Okay.
go to where you do your video, like where it says stop video. Click on it, on that little arrow that's pointing up. And
Oh,
then-
right, okay.
And then choose, and you have blur my background there, or choose virtual background. Click choose virtual background. And then when it comes
Oh, my
up,
stupid clicker.
well, when you
I
get
have
to,
to hit it 40 times. to open.
okay, and then go, and then
Sorry,
just click
everyone.
on none. You have blur on
Oh,
there.
okay,
Click on none. Do you
I'm
see it?
trying to. What happens is I'll click it and then I don't get it.
There you
Is that a
go.
little better?
There you go. Yeah, you're good. Yeah, you're good.
Okay,
Thanks, Cynthia.
No problem.
okay, thanks. I can't see myself, but that's okay. Because I just want to help out Rescue Lake Simcoe with getting some more donations. I made a painting. I don't know if you can see it. It's reflecting the walk of a water walker, and I'll finish it and sign it. So for every $10 and anyone donates, you'll get a ballot in a draw for that painting. Okay.
Yeah, you can,
Here.
put-
That's-
Margaret, put up the website, the link again.
Yeah, we'll do.
You see, yeah, she'll do that. And so now Margaret is going to tell everybody a little bit about the work that we've done with this campaign. So take it away, Margaret. Thanks.
Well, first I got to put in the donation information, and then can't do everything at once, folks. So your
I'll do
donation
that.
information should be there now, and then I'm
Yes.
going to. Sorry, I'm going to pin me and unpin. All right. Hi, folks. Margaret Prophet with the Simcoe County Green Belt Coalition. And I want to just back us up a little bit because we've had a few comments and questions. And there, as you can see, has been a really great effort in bringing in a lot of people who are extreme experts who understand the land, whether it be from a settler or an expert position or an Indigenous perspective. So we have done a really great job at bringing people together. Some of you may have come to this webinar with a common misunderstanding. So if you have this, don't be worried. A lot of people have this mistake and it's intentional, that the 413, the Bradford Bypass are the same highway. There are actually two highways planned in the Greenbelt. And we are talking about the bypass, which is further north between the 400 and the 404. The 413, although longer, actually takes out less Greenbelt land than the Bradford Bypass. So we are hoping to stop both highways, but tonight we are focused on the bypass. And a little bit about when the bypass, this was a zombie project, that was resurrected. And at the time, Bill Foster and others, as well as local First Nation councils, were really opposed to the highway, and it was shelved. And it was only rejuvenated officially by the Ford government as far as this is the plan, this is we're going to take off just a few years ago. And at that time, the conversation about the 413 had really taken off. And when we got involved, Claire and I and Bill and others on this call, it was a project that wasn't getting a lot of attention. A lot of the conversation about highways was about the 413, which is much larger and closer to Toronto media. The local media wasn't covering it all or accepting kind of press releases from local councils as fact, and or from minister as fact without any kind of critical analysis. At the time when we started, the public survey, according to the township, had like 75% of people in the area supportive of the highway. So the odds were really kind of stacked against this small little group of concerned citizens who felt that Ontarians deserve better transparency. And because of the efforts of people on this call and others who aren't here tonight, not only have we had, over 200 media mentions about the bypass, we have had several investigative pieces in the Toronto Star, the Narwhal, the Pointer, National Observer, Global National News. We have taken that support from 75% to now roughly 20% in favor of the highway. So it has taken a precipitous drop. And the only reason it has done that is because more and more people are starting to understand just the reality of it. We have put in a lot of freedom of information requests, trying to get at the documents that the governments don't want you to see, with facts and knowledge that they don't want us to know. From those investigations, we have uncovered that they want to make this highway bigger, although it's only supposed to be 4 lanes. Now we've heard that the province wants to make it 8 lanes. We also discovered that there was a lot of concern about endangered species. We've also discovered that they don't have a plan about how they're going to deal with Lake Simcoe or climate change impacts. From our FOIs, we've also discovered for the first time that the price tag that they were announcing publicly was not the price tag that they knew internally. And then the Auditor General followed that up and found that this highway, although originally slated $800 million, is now going to be anywhere between $2 to $4 billion. So it's going to be several $100,000 per kilometer for this highway. And Ford has said kindly that all Ontarians will pay for that. So I'm sure as you're watching tonight's presentation, you were like, I don't understand how it got this far. How is it possible that we have this significant site that's going to be plowed under for a bridge? How is it possible we're going to have a 16-kilometer highway based on a 30-year-old environmental study, based on no study of alternative routes that include transit or the climate? This highway, when it was formulated in the 80s, it was before we had a Lake Simcoe protection plan. It was before we had a growth plan, before we had the Greenbelt plan. So I wanted to give everybody just a little bit of history of where this little movement has taken us over these years. And I'm really proud that SCGC and others have been really involved in it. So we're looking a lot now at bringing more attention to the destructive impacts of this highway. So again, tonight we're talking about the ancient Indigenous sites. We're also talking about Lake Simcoe, about the drinking water in the area, the destruction of endangered species habitat, and of course, climate and air pollution. And most importantly, the lack of transparency and process around costs. So some of the things we have done, we have sent a petition. We've done lots, but just in the last little bit, we have sent a petition to the federal government showing our concerns about First Nations archaeology, about the consultation around that, Salt and Lake Simcoe. And the petition title is called Enforcement of the Fisheries Act to Protect Lake Simcoe from Chloride Pollution and Disenfranchisement of Effective First Nation Bans in All Material Phases of the Bradford Bypass Environmental Assessment. And we will see what their answers are. The other thing, and I think Claire has put it in there, is that we want you to become informed so you can inform your network. So there should be a link to Rescue Lake Simcoe Coalition, and I shared one for Simcoe County Greenbelt Coalition, some fact sheets, some ideas, some things so you can connect with your network. We are also hoping to host town halls in areas along the route, because for too long, the talking points locally and provincially have been, this is going to be a great highway and this is going to be really beneficial, even though their own traffic studies show that the road will be fairly congested shortly after it's building, and it'll make the traffic on Highway 400 and 404 worse than what it is now, than if they never built it at all. So even their own traffic studies haven't been transparent about it. So we want to have town halls with communities that are going to be directly impacted by this, to show them what is the information that the government doesn't want them to hear, so that they can have informed consent, which is different than what we're getting now. So we have one planned for the afternoon of Sunday, June 11th at the link in Sutton. And Claire will be sharing all of these things. So I'm not sure, I'm not following along, Claire, if you're sharing them, but I'm sure in the chat she'll be sharing the link if you want to be involved in that. This Sunday, we're hosting a rally in front of MPP Caroline Mulrooney's constituency office. That's at 55 Grist Mill Road in Holland Landing from 1:30 to 3. And then also support the groups that are here tonight, or the people that are here tonight on social media. You may not think it matters, but the more that people hear about the issue, the more of an impact it makes. I mean, to be frank, there's not much of a legal challenge left from a colonial point of view. There could be potentially Indigenous legal avenues, but that's not for us to decide. That's another issue. So we really don't have many legal issues left that we can take further. What it's going to require is a lot of community involvement and a lot of community pushback. So that means that we need to embarrass the province and the people that support this project to say, do you know exactly what you're doing? Do you know that in a time of healthcare crisis, education crisis, climate, that they're going to spend $2 to $4 billion of our money rather than putting it towards, proper long-term care homes, towards affordable housing? So that would mean send a letter to your paper. You don't have to be a researcher like we have on here. You can be someone just saying, I went to this webinar, I really hate this idea. Why is the government not doing something different? So send letters into your paper, talk to your local councillors, talk to your MPP. The more that they see that there's a public concern, the more likely they will make different decisions. And even though people will say, well, you don't really make a difference. What I've learned about my time in politics is nothing is ever settled in stone, that it's always a game of the way the wind is blowing. And even though decisions look like they're set and they're going to happen a certain way, as soon as there's enough public pushback and embarrassment about the facts of the matter, politicians are always willing to change. And anybody on this call that's worked with politicians will know that's the name of the game. So the other thing I wanted to just say, as Claire mentioned, and thank you, Becky, for your amazing donation, is that these sort of things, we can't staff the revolution, but there are certain things that make it easier for us to do the work that we do. So for example, today I just put in freedom of information requests, actually about a month or two ago. I just got back that there's documents they have found from Caroline Mulrooney's office to the MTO staff talking about Lake Simcoe and climate, and those aren't public to us. We have to pay to get those. So in total, we have about $500 worth of freedom of information requests. So that money, if we can fundraise that, allows us to purchase those documents and see what is there to further bring transparency to this issue. The town halls, again, aren't free because we have to rent space and we have to get photocopies and things like that. So if you bear with me, if you don't mind, I'd just like to do a very quick donation drive to see if there are people on the call who'd be willing to pledge in the chat that they can donate tonight something. If it's $5, $10, if everybody put $10 in tonight, then that means we have almost enough money to pay for the freedom of information requests and our town halls. So thank you, Donna, for donating $100. Is there anybody else that'd be willing to match Donna's donation? Trying to see the chat. Kim, Lori, thank you, Lori. Bill Trainer, thank you, $50. Lindsay, obviously, thank you, all of you for, so $100 from Kathy, thank you. Lindsay for 50, you know what, Wilma 100, Bill 200, I can't keep up with it, so thank you. for pledging that. And please check the link to make your pledge good. Thank you, Bill, for 25. Evans family, $100. Thank you so much. And keep in mind that every donation you make comes with a charitable receipt. So it helps you. Cynthia, thank you for donating as well. Every little bit makes a difference. Susan, thank you for your donation. Our hope is that we can raise $1,000 tonight, and that would allow us to support the town halls, to help groups, including the amazing Indigenous speakers we heard tonight, as well as to get at those documents that they don't want us to see. So thank you, everybody. I hope, Claire, I didn't overstay my welcome, but we're glad to have you here, and please thank you, Brian, for the $100. We hope that, I think we almost have the $1,000, because that's got to be at least 5 or 10 people.
Why did we never do this before? This has been the fastest and most amazing fundraising effort of all time. So thank you so much, everybody. I'm surprised and really grateful. And can we save the chat? I also not able to keep up with that list. Okay,
yes, we'll save the chat, and I will unpin myself. And thank you, everybody, for the little bit, or however much you did. Small grassroots groups like ours and community members like you see here tonight. We have had a lot of our funding cut, if we had any funding to begin with, especially when it comes to environmental or Indigenous issues. And so every little bit, it requires now the community to take care of itself. So thank you for everyone for being a part of that.
Thanks, Margaret. That was so well said. It's so lovely to see so many of our regular friends and community members in the chat here, but also there are tons of people that perhaps have never met the Rescue Lake Simcoe Coalition, Simcoe County Greenbelt Coalition, and Coalition for Water Justice and Frogs before. So welcome. Really nice of you to join us. One of the things we're trying to do is bring people into these networks, based on various interests. So I hope that worked for you. I'll put it in the chat one more time. We have just booked one town hall site, but we want to do more. And at those, we'll print out some large maps, because what we really want to do is have a look at the different route alternatives. We want to do what the government will not do, which is look at other alternatives, because as you have heard, even just from an Indigenous rights perspective, this is not okay, this path. But you've heard a lot of reasons why this particular path is a bad idea. So we want the public to be able to see a bit more what the alternatives are. And we want to say, government, we want you to transparently reconsider those routes and choose a better one that doesn't cost $4 billion in Wreck Lake Simcoe, so that our tax dollars can go into further fixing Lake Simcoe. Like, it's just stupid. So I'll put another link in for that. And if you sign up for that list, then you will be notified when we have all the dates. Also, I just wanted to say everybody who registered will get a link to this recording when it has been posted online, and we'll be sharing it online on social media and newsletters and stuff as well. We are almost at the end here. We're going to do a Q&A. So there are a few questions in the chat, and I'm going to direct this one to Roderick or anybody who knows. I was wondering, what is the meaning of the name East Holland River? Does anybody know the answer to that question? I mean, any of our panelists might know. I don't have any buzzers for you, though. If you know the answer, you could just unmute and answer the question. Maybe nobody knows. Well, that's a follow-up. That's a follow-up question. So another question was, this presentation seems to be enough to halt the construction of the highway. No? Well, in a lot of ways, that's what we're hoping for. Not that just this presentation will do that, but that the MTO and the government have some more information about what is at stake, and they understand that it won't fly. Is there anyone else on the panel that wanted to answer that question?
What was the first station? What was that? Lake or river, whatever?
No, name of that river.
It was, what is the meaning of Escoyondi, Holland River? What is the meaning of the name?
If I can't understand that, I would have to see it. How do they spell it?
I'm gonna put it in the chat.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because that would be interesting. And
I'm wondering if it might be kind of a Wendat word, possibly, because it doesn't feel Anishinaabe in my view. Maybe we could take it to John Steckley. He's an author with a lot of knowledge of the native languages, so we can respond to that maybe by putting it in the Rescue Lake Simcoe website.
How do you spell it again?
I put it in the chat. It is Escoyoondy. Escoyondi. Escoyondi. Okay. Are there any other questions here from anybody? There's a question about the 413, but I'm not gonna.
There's a question about what was the federal minister of the environment's response to this highway, which is a very long and storied answer. I don't know if someone wants to take a crack at that, or I can.
Go ahead, Margaret.
Okay, so you may remember, if you've been following any of the highway chat, about how the 413 is getting an impact assessment. The federal government is intervening, or at least looking to intervene. We followed along that path as well, and we submitted our request to the federal minister at the same time that the 413 group submitted their request. And despite us having similar concerns and the same amount of public concern, endangered red-headed woodpecker habitat directly in the path, Indigenous concerns, the minister decided to intervene on the 413 and not intervene on the Bradford Bypass. We were not happy about that. And about a year later, we decided to put another request into the minister to say, look, we think that there's more information about this highway that would change your decision. We included more about the lower landing. We included more about salt. We included more about endangered species and climate. And the answer we got back was, I'm paraphrasing, we've already looked at this once. Nothing has changed. And we are confident that the province is going to do a full environmental study, and we are satisfied. And we didn't like that answer either, not only because it's disingenuous to what an impact assessment is supposed to be, but their answer isn't supported by any of their policies. So groups like Rescue Lake Simcoe Coalition and Frogs and others decided to take that under a judicial review and say that you guys just making a decision quickly that you've already looked at it, you're not going to look at it again, you're not going to listen to experts, you're not going to give your ministries time to look at the new information, is against your own policies, and it has a large impact for projects across Canada. So that's still in court, and we're awaiting a decision for that. The short answer is that the federal ministry of the environment seems to think that this highway doesn't really pose a lot of risk. And they put in one of our petition, we submitted a petition to the minister, or to the environmental commissioner, federal environmental commissioner, about these questions. And the impact assessment agency said, it's not our job to look at cumulative impacts to water or to climate. Which are two big concerns that we have. And so I think that all of us feel that are working on this, that the federal government has let down the community very largely by not intervening, and by allowing the province to set a precedent about how highways are treated. The Bradford Bypass got all of the streamline and all of the cuts to its EA first. They have now started an environmental assessment. They have now started to take those ideas of what a what a streamlined environmental assessment can mean, which is basically, in our words, cutting corners, making it so meaningless that what's the point of even doing it? They have now applied that model to future highways and are trying to apply that to the 413 as well. So it seems like all future highways in Ontario are going to get the Bradford Bypass treatment, as we call it, which means very little legal teeth about what the province is supposed to do when they find out there's harms to the public or to our water or to climate, that they're allowed to use old data that's decades, back in the time when I was a toddler. They're allowed to use that data even though things have materially changed, and they're allowed to call it updates without really any scientific significance to what they found. So that's where it is. It's a disappointing story from the federal environment.
Amazing. There's another question about federal fish studies. I mean, I can speak to this. Bill, do you want to speak to this? No. Okay, he's on mute anyway. Okay. So in general, what's that? Okay, I'm going to answer this. Okay.
What is the question?
The question is, what's the status of federal fish studies? So I'll just tell you, okay, so I'll speak to this. So basically, people may have heard about what they called early works. So it is what is under construction right now, just north of Bradford. It is to tie in with the widening of Yonge Street. This was already, the widening of Yonge Street was already planned. So they said, okay, we're going to build this highway anyway, so we might as well build the overpass or underpass or whatever it is there at the same time. That kind of makes some sense. However, it was also very tricky of the project proponent, because this is the government of Ontario, the MTO, Ministry of Transportation. They said, oh, well, we'll do this bit first, and then the project is substantially commenced, and then they think there's a definition for that, and then they think that means you can't stop it anymore. Well, we say the bridge is not built, and it's such a terrible plan. There is still a lot of time to stop this, okay? Maybe not a lot of time, but we still definitely have runway to stop this. So they did some fish studies around that early works bit right at Yonge Street, just north of Bradford. And it was really a farce. I mean, we got the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters to write a letter to the MTO because we thought they would listen to us when they might not listen. Sorry, they would listen to them when they might not listen to us. And their response was, okay, sure, we'll look at it. But to that point, basically the federal government responsible was saying, we don't want to give you any permits for this project before we see the whole project plan. Like, we don't want to just say it's okay to destroy fish habitat in this one little area if you don't really have a plan to build your whole highway. And then with no explanation, they changed their mind and said, okay, we're going to give you permits to totally destroy the fish habitat. It was a very small creek, but still they have a rule that says you cannot, alter, disrupt, harm fish habitat. And then they fully gave a permit to destroy the fish habitat. And then we learned through another Freedom of Information request that the Department of Fisheries and Oceans has never turned down one of these requests. They have never said no in the Lake Simcoe watershed or the Nottawasaga watershed. So that is not good enough at this point in time. And so I still think that we have some space to move on the fish piece too. And so all of you fishermen out there and people who love the fish, we really are going to need you. So if you haven't followed the prompts that you got today, please pay attention when you get the email from us later on this week that shows you how you can sign up with us and stay informed and etc. Our group meets every 2 weeks on a Tuesday evening on Zoom, and we are absolutely welcoming new members if anybody here is interested. So again, just wait till later in the week to get some more information about that. There are more questions here. Okay. Are there any more questions?
I think comments mostly.
No, there are more comments. Okay. So last call for questions, and then we're going to move over to Becky to wrap it up. And in the meantime, I'm going to pull up some video that was shot by Chris on the Res. the guy who I don't know Chris, so I'm sorry, Becky can probably introduce him better than me, but he runs the radio station at Georgina Island First Nation. Sorry, I've just lost that particular piece of video. I'll find it in a second. Okay, I'm going to share the screen and play this, and Becky is going to close out here. So go ahead, Becky.
Okay, thank you, Claire. And everyone can hear me okay? Okay. Yeah, looking at that beautiful, beautiful water, that's our southwestern piece of Georgina Island. And for that bit and for all the water and all the work that we do, we just come to you right now, great creator, benevolent giver of all that we need to thrive and survive in our lands. We thank you so much for all the gracious gifts you give us. The air we breathe, the land we walk upon, the water that replenishes our spirits daily. We acknowledge all these gifts and thank you for them. We thank you for the responsibly minded adults in our region who want to come together and work for the betterment and the keeping of all of our land that we share in common. We thank you for the crops. We thank you for the farmers. We thank you for the people who bring that food to market. We thank you for those precious gifts. We want to pledge to you, Creator, that we'll continue to work, that this land that you provided for us will continue to provide for generations to come. We are so grateful, remaining ever so. Chimigwech, Gajamanado, thank you so much. Miigwech. And thank you to everyone who came. I think you'll be able to find the results of the draw on the Rescue Lake Simcoe website in the days to come. So thank you all so very, very much.
Thank you, Becky. Really appreciate that. That was a really, really fantastic ending. I want to thank all of the participants very much for spending their time with us this afternoon and all the preparation and the technological hurdles involved in getting here. And in particular to all of the people that are working, as Becky has so eloquently described, to make the world a better place with gratitude and compassion and positivity for how we can work together. So let this be a model for all of us. Chimigwech to all of you, and good night. Thank
Good
you.
night.
Batch.
Good night.
Right, thank you.
Okay, thanks everyone. I'm gonna stop it now.